Thank you, Chairman. It's 10 o'clock and the live stream's now working.
Good morning, members. Welcome to this virtual meeting of the Customer and Support Services Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Before considering today's business, I will outline the protocols for the meeting. Today's meeting is being live streamed to the public via Microsoft Teams and is also being recorded. May I remind members and officers to introduce themselves each time you speak and turn your video and microphone off when you have finished speaking. If the Council's live stream fails during the meeting and we cannot share the proceedings, I will adjourn the meeting so that access can be restored. If the issue cannot be resolved, I will halt the meeting and the remaining business will be concluded at a future date. If a member experiences a technical issue, I will adjourn for a short period to try and re-establish their connection. Members wishing to speak or ask a question should indicate by typing X in the chat box. The Vice Chairman will assist me in calling members to speak, and we will remind you to switch on your microphone. If for some reason you cannot be heard, the Democratic officer will advise you. Votes will be taken using the roll call procedure. The Democratic officer will read out the recommendation and the name of the proposer and seconder, and will then call each committee member's name in turn. You should confirm your name and advise whether you vote in favour or against the recommendation, or whether you wish to abstain from the vote. The Democratic officer will then count the votes and advise the result accordingly. Where a member has declared a non-registrable interest, a disclosable pecuniary interest, or an interest by virtue of any trade union membership in a matter, they must leave the virtual meeting. Their departure will be confirmed and they will be invited to rejoin the meeting at the appropriate time. I plan to have a 10-minute break at about 11 o'clock, but will try to avoid breaking mid-agenda item. If the meeting continues for longer than another hour after that, I will look to have a second break. Before we start today's business, I will ask the Democratic Services Officer to confirm members and officers in attendance today. Thank you.
Good morning, Tracy Clark, Democratic and Governance Officer. This is for confirmation of voting members. I will call your name. Please could you confirm your name and your electoral division? Councillor Rutherford. Can't hear you, Councillor Rutherford.
Yeah, I was muted. Yeah, Councillor Rutherford, Camborne, Treslotham.
Thank you. Councillor Barnes.
Yes, good morning. My name's Stephen Barnes and I'm a member for Redruth North.
Thank you. Councillor Burden.
Neil Burden, Stoke Clemsland Division.
Thank you. Councillor Buscombe.
Councillor Buscombe, representing Padstow and St Mirren and Chair of the Customer and Support Services Scrutiny Committee.
Thank you. Councillor Eddy.
Good morning. Councillor Martin Eddy, representing the St Cleer Division.
Thank you. Councillor Eckinsmith.
Good morning. Thank you. Councillor David Eakin-Smith, representing Illugan and substituting for Councillor Helen Hawkins this morning.
Thank you. Councillor Frost.
Councillor Frost, Bobbin St Petrock.
Thank you. Councillor Keeling.
Councillor Keeling, representing Bree, Gurmo and Sydney Division.
Thank you. Councillor Monk.
Councillor Oliver Monk, representing New Peter Logan.
Thank you. Councillor Moorcroft.
Good morning, Tracy. Councillor Robin Moorcroft, Weybridge West.
Thank you. Councillor Mould.
Good morning, Carol Mould, St Mimber and St Endelian Division.
Thank you. Councillor Saunders.
Good morning, Councillor Saunders, representing Bugle Division.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Good morning, Councillor Linda Taylor, Carbis Bainley Land, substituting for Councillor Biggs.
Thank you. Councillor White.
Good morning. It is Paul White, representing Camborne Roskirk.
Thank you. And Councillor Wills.
Councillor Paul Wills, representing St Columbia Major Electoral Division.
Thank you very much. That concludes confirmation of the voting members. I can also confirm that the following cabinet members are present: Councillor Julian German, Leader of the Council and Councillor for the Roseland, Councillor Adam Painter, Deputy Leader and Councillor for Lunkston North and North Petherwin, and Councillor Mikey Thungibbons, Cabinet Member for Customers and Councillor for Laddock, St Clement and St Erme. I can also confirm the following officers are present: Tracy Langley, Interim Chief Operating Officer and Section 151 Officer, Ellie Wilcox, Head of Financial Planning and Insight, Peter Hockin, Corporate Finance Strategy Manager, Debbie Bolton, Democratic and Governance Officer, but today she's producing the meeting, which is more of a technical role in the world of virtual meetings, and myself, Tracy Clark, Democratic and Governance Officer, performing the usual Democratic Officer role, including procedural advice, minutes and collating the votes. Thank you, Chairman. And back to yourself and the agenda.
Thank you very much, Tracy. Moving on to the agenda, item number 1, apologies for absence.
No apologies received, Chairman.
Item number 2, declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest, members? Okay, thank you very much. Now, item number 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 10th of March 2020. You've all had a chance to look at them. Any questions around accuracy, please? So if we're okay with that, I'll move back to Tracy to read the recommendations for us, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Tracy Clark, Democratic and Governance Officer. The recommendation is that the minutes of the meeting of the Customer and Support Services Overview and Scrutiny Committee held on 10th of March 2020 were correctly recorded and that they be signed by the Chairman. If you would like to propose or second that recommendation, please could you put an X in the chat box?
I would like to propose those minutes, if that's okay. Yes, I'll propose. I'm quite happy to propose the minutes, and I think we've got.
I've seconded them. Well, and with everybody else.
Okay, that's lovely. So just to remind then, the recommendation is the minutes of the meeting of the Customer and Support Services Overview and Scrutiny Committee held on 10th March 2020 were correctly recorded and that they be signed by the Chairman. That's been proposed by Councillor Buscombe and seconded by Councillor Burden. So I'll come to each of you in turn. If you could please confirm your vote either for, against or abstain. Councillor Atherfold, please.
Councillor Atherfold, for.
Councillor Barnes, please.
Councillor Barnes, for.
Councillor Burden, please.
For.
Councillor Buscombe, please.
For.
Councillor Eddy.
For.
Councillor Eakin-Smith.
I'll abstain as I wasn't there.
Thank you. Councillor Frost.
For.
Councillor Keeling.
For.
Councillor Monk.
For.
Councillor Moorcroft.
For.
Councillor Mould.
For.
Councillor Saunders.
Councillor Saunders, for.
Councillor Taylor.
Abstain as I wasn't there.
Councillor White.
For.
And Councillor Wills.
For.
Chairman, I can confirm that the result of the vote is as follows: 13 for and 2 abstentions. The recommendation has therefore been agreed.
Thank you very much, members. Moving on to agenda item 4, public questions.
No public questions received, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Item number 5, committee work programme. Tracy, would you like to kick us off on this one, please?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Tracy Clark, Democratic and Governance Officer. This is generally a regular item on the agenda for the committee to agree its work programme. The difference this time is that due to the virtual meetings being shorter, all the scrutiny committees are asking for members to agree the programme for the rest of the municipal year rather than bringing them to each meeting. We all understand sometimes priorities change or an important new topic arises, and therefore we're asking for delegation to the Chairman in consultation with those set out in recommendation 2 to make any required amendments. We will circulate the work programme to committee members via email prior to each formal meeting. The work programme is attached to the agenda at page 26. The Chairman and I drew up this programme following the committee's informal work programme development session on 9th of June, at which officers advised on their directorate delivery plan for the year, and members gave their views on what they'd like to be included. We've since consulted with officers with regard to appropriate timings for the topics, and we've amended it further following feedback from members when it was circulated recently, just a couple of weeks ago. So it's divided into sections. The first section is the formal meetings and topics to be brought. The second section, if you have a look at the top of page 29, this relates to a piece of task and finish work, focusing on working with and developing local supply chains with a view to supporting local suppliers and the voluntary community and social enterprise sector and adding social value. And I'll come back to this in a moment. The next section is for informal committee development stroke information sessions, and this is for topics where a recommendation isn't required and we don't want to take up formal meeting time. For instance, bringing members up to date with the latest information on a topic, or reporting back on progress against previous recommendations of working groups, etc. And then the last section is for briefing notes with an opportunity for questions and answers via email, which will be taken outside of the formal meetings. I believe there's a good spread of work across the Directorate's activities. You'll notice there isn't a standalone COVID report, but there was a full report on this to Cabinet in June with regard to the Council's response to the pandemic. And also this topic will be absolutely inseparable when we're looking at individual items such as budget and financial planning, vision and devolution, customer strategy, voluntary and community sector, climate change, transformation, which includes property and people, performance framework and the group of companies. So there'll be plenty of opportunities to be discussing the COVID response. So coming back to the recommendations on pages 17 and 18, the third one is with regard to appointing members to the working group, and from those appointing a chairman, and also delegating that the terms of reference can be drawn up so as to avoid delaying their approval to the October committee meeting and meaning that we can get on with this piece of work. Is it okay if I hand back to you, Chairman, now to ask for any questions and any volunteers for the working group?
Yes, thank you for that, Tracy. I noticed there are a couple of crosses in the box, but before I come to them, I would just like to refer back to the Task and Finish group. The Task and Finish subject, which we chose back in June, was to look at the sourcing of suppliers to enhance capacity for Cornwall Council and its group of companies to support the local supply chain, and in particular, the role of voluntary community and social enterprises in Cornwall. Now, we did a very good piece of work last year, which Martin Eddy led on, which I think was very important and something we as a scrutiny committee can be proud of. So I've asked Martin if he would lead on this piece of work, and he's kindly agreed to do that. So we will be looking for some members to join that group. You can express your interest today or after the meeting if you want to get in contact with either Martin, myself, or Tracy. So, Martin will be leading on that piece of work, which I think is very important, given, the state of the Cornish economy. So I'll say no more on for the time being on that. I think the first person that wanted to speak on this was Councillor Keeling, I believe. Is that not right, Neil? Councillor Keeling?
Yeah, that's quite correct, Chairman, and thank you very much. And if you need a volunteer for that particular working group, yeah, you've got me. I was going to say look for somebody else, but I don't mean that. I mean, I will volunteer for that. I'm just wondering, as part of the work programme, can we not have sight of the Cabinet work programme? Because, we're looking at decisions that are going to be made in the future, and we may want to look at those decisions depending on the subject matter. This follows a comment made at Cabinet that scrutiny should be looking forward at possible decisions coming forward, and how we actually can engage in a bit of pre-scrutiny work. It used to be on the work programme. It used to be on the agenda, but it doesn't seems to have dropped off a little bit. Okay.
If I could just first of all say thank you very much for volunteering, John. Your experience and knowledge of scrutiny will be very much appreciated. On the question of the Cabinet Work Programme, we do see that it's circulated to members. So Tracy, I guess we could compare and compare those two documents, couldn't we, and see if there are things there we need to draw out.
Absolutely, Chairman. On page 22 of the agenda, under consultation and engagement, it mentions the Cabinet Work Programme and that the committee should have regard to that in setting its own work programme. There's a link there also on that page to it. So absolutely, members should keep an eye on it. It's published monthly also. And if there's anything coming up on the Cabinet Work Programme that members feel that they ought to be looking at in pre-decision scrutiny, then if you could please raise it with the Chairman, and hopefully he should have a delegation today to be able to make amendments to the work programme as we go along.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Bye.
Neil, who's next?
Yeah, we got three now. Councillor Barnes, Councillor Eddy, and Councillor Mould.
And Councillor Barnes, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Regarding this working with developing local supply chains, how does this link in with the proposal that went to full council from Councillor Kirkham?
If I could say, yes, we did take that into consideration, and I did speak at length to the Cabinet member, Councillor Ethorne Gibbons, on this. And I think if I could ask Mike, could you just comment on that, because we're very keen. These two pieces of work should coincide, if that's the sort of the general will of the people that raised this motion at full council. So, Mike, could you give us an update, please, on your discussions with Councillor Kirkham?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, happy so to do. I welcome the work that your committee is thinking of doing here. Just a very brief update of where I've got to so far in terms of discussion with Councillor Kirkham. She and I met along with her senior officer to try and put some flesh around her motion. I subsequently had a more detailed meeting with other officers. It is planned that there will be a full workshop on the 4th of August. There's going to be the commercial team and legal team there, really to take the thing forward. And it is planned to have another meeting on the 11th of September. We would have liked it earlier, but I'm sure you all appreciate that August is a difficult time to get people present because they're on holiday and so on and so forth. Some of the key points that have emerged excuse me, so far is actually looking at what other local authorities are doing, and particularly to give weight to the use of subcontractors in the supply chain. Clearly, one of the things also to look at is the bureaucracy around the pre-registration system and make it less bureaucratic. So that gives you some of the themes at the moment to support what we're doing. So I hope that gives you an overall feel of what's going on at the moment. But I certainly do welcome a detailed review of the supply chain by the committee. And clearly for us, the more that we can use suppliers in Cornwall, the better.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mike. Councillor Barnes, is that okay? Are you happy with that response?
Well, it was a very good answer, but he didn't really say a lot. So, are they looking to complement or contradict what might be happening with Councillor Kirkham's motion?
Well, I think from the chair, I would say definitely complement.
Well, I would like confirmation from the cabinet members. It's hard to believe them until you see their lips moving.
Watch closely now, Councillor Burns. Watch my lips there. Now, to be serious for a moment, I think it was a very good motion that came forward, but we do want to be specific there and put some weight behind good intentions there. And as I said earlier, the good intentions are very much to use local suppliers and make the system less bureaucratic and encourage them so to do, because from my experience of dealing with local suppliers, they take one look at the council arrangements and say, we're not interested. We have to try and change that attitude going forward.
Right, thank you.
You're right. We've got Martin next.
Councillor Eddy, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for asking me to chair the Task and Finish group. I agree. I think the two things do complement each other. We will be looking at the sourcing of suppliers and really to enhance, as he says, the capacity of CC and his group of companies to support local suppliers. I think Jane's motion is looking at the contracts themselves, enhancing the social value in them, enhancing the climate change elements, the registration. And I think it would be useful. I don't know how Councillor Barnes is fixed, but I mean, obviously he is a signatory to that motion to council. He would form a link between the two things. If he was to volunteer to be on the group, that would be very helpful. But I see the two things very much complementing each other. Thank you, Chairman.
Right, Councillor Mould.
Morning, Mr. Chairman. Just to say, I'd be happy to volunteer to sit on the Task and Finish group. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Mould. Very helpful. Thank you.
Good. Mr. Chairman, could I just say one thing?
Please.
Over the years, members have kept on about this, but the officers don't seem to actually make it happen. And I just think, I mean, I remember back in the 1990s, we were talking about local suppliers, etc., etc. And we seem to be always on the back foot. And I just, you know, whoever the committee are, I think we've got to be very proactive and actually get some movement this time, because as you said, the regulations, as the cabinet member said, the regulations and how you sign up and that, you know, I know local contractors who want to do a bit of hedge trimming or something like that, they find it a nightmare and just pull out. So I think we need to be more understanding of the issues locally. And hopefully we will get some progress.
Councillor Burden, I think you just volunteered for the group.
Have I? Oh,
yeah, I think you have, yes.
I'll have to ponder on that.
I think you jumped in front of Councillor Taylor. I think Councillor Taylor's next.
Oh, sorry. At the same time, yeah.
Councillor Taylor, please.
Yes, thank you for bringing me in. Could I make an observation or request about the work programme? It refers to the Cornwall We Want, and I think we've seen information quite recently that shows that obviously our population's over 500,000 and we've probably had less than 400 replies. This is quite an important piece of work, especially when it's going to be used to shape the council's 2050 vision. And I'm wondering, can this committee use any influence it may have in really addressing the issue of engaging with a much wider audience and not to be totally dependent on people who may or may not use the internet? Thank you.
Yeah, just speaking from the chair, Councillor Taylor, I couldn't agree with you more. In a different life, back in the 1990s, I was a resident and engagement officer for a district council up in Devon, and trying to get a wide a spread of views that reflected, you know, the community as a whole was always a real challenge. And I'm very alive to the points that you raise, and I will definitely be pursuing that so that we have a broad spectrum from young people, people with disabilities, people not on the internet. All those views need to be, you know, fed into the decision and to the strategy. So I fully support.
Thank you for your reassurance, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, the leader wants to speak.
Councillor German, please.
Thank you, Councillor Bascom. I just wanted to comment on procurement and the use of local businesses. So some councillors may remember a time, I think the 1990s were referred to, when perhaps the county council wasn't very good at using local companies. Many of us weren't involved then, don't have that memory. But in terms of what's happened in recent years, we should be celebrating that Cornwall is one of the best authorities for using local companies. So whilst I'm not saying that we're perfect and there isn't more that we can do, we should absolutely be looking at the benchmarking with other authorities and celebrating that we're one of the top performing authorities in this area. Thank you.
Councillor, do we have any more?
No, that's all. Everybody's gone quiet.
Okay. So with no one else wishing to speak on this, I will ask Tracy Clark now to read the recommendations.
That's Tracy Clark, Democratic and Governance Officer. May I check first, Chairman, is Councillor Barnes taking up the offer of joining the working group and being the link to the motion?
Councillor Barnes?
Not at this stage, thank you very much. If you get plenty of volunteers, I'll more than willing stand aside.
So far, Chairman, we have councillors Eddie, Keeling and Mould, and also you suggested Councillor Burden. Councillor Burden, are you taking up the offer of joining the working group, please?
Well, if there's a mass of people, I'll step down, but at the moment, yes.
And could I ask if there are any other volunteers, please, for the working group? It would be excellent if we could have 5.
I think someone might reflect on it, Tracy, and be in touch with us over the next couple of days. And there's one person in particular I would like to see on the group, but they might be a bit shy today, so I might speak to them over the next couple of days and try and convince them.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. So to confirm the recommendations then, recommendation 1, the committee work programme as set out at Appendix 1 to this report be approved for the remainder of the term of the current administration. Recommendation 2, authority to make further amendments to the committee work programme in response to new or changing priorities be delegated from the committee to the chairman of the committee in consultation with the vice chairman of the committee, the chief operating officer and the democratic and governance officer, with the work programme being circulated to committee members by email prior to each formal committee meeting. And the third recommendation, that a working group consisting of 5 committee members, including councillors Eddie, Keeling and Mould, with Councillor Eddie as lead member, be convened in relation to working with and developing local supply chains, and with further appointment to the group being delegated to the committee chairman following expressions of interest from the committee. And then finally, that development and approval of the terms of reference for the working group be delegated to the Chief Operating Officer in consultation with the Statutory Scrutiny Officer and the Chairman and Vice Chairman of the committee, with the final version being circulated to the committee by email. So could I ask, do we have a proposer and a seconder, please, for those recommendations?
Proposer and seconder, please.
If you could indicate with the cross in the box.
I'm quite happy to propose that.
I'll second.
And Councillor Eddie and Councillor Frost.
So we have Councillor Buscombe proposing and Councillor Eddie seconding. And then I'll come to you each in turn, and if you could confirm your vote, please. Councillor Atherfold.
Councillor Atherfold, 4.
Councillor Barnes.
4.
Councillor Burden.
4.
Councillor Buscombe.
4.
Councillor Eddie.
4.
Councillor Eakin-Smith.
4.
Councillor Frost.
4.
Councillor Keeling.
4.
Councillor Monk.
4.
Councillor Moorcroft.
4.
Councillor Mould.
4.
Councillor Saunders.
4.
Councillor Taylor.
4.
Councillor White.
4.
And Councillor Wills. Councillor Wills?
4. Sorry, couldn't find my mute button.
No problem. Chairman, I can confirm that the result of the vote is 15 votes for, and that's unanimous. So the recommendation has therefore been agreed.
Thank you very much indeed, Tracy. Moving on to item number 6, Budget 2021-22 and Medium-Term Financial Plan 2021 to 25. Now, before I ask Tracy Langley to give us a presentation, I'd just like to say that in my time as chairman of this committee, I've been very pleased and proud of the work that we've done. With the exception of the budget, so I've never really felt that we've actually got to grips with scrutinising the budget for a whole host of reasons. And I know when I've spoken, informally to other chairs of other scrutiny committees, that feeling's been reflected and agreed on by them. So I was very, very anxious, given that this is going to be the last year of this scrutiny committee before the elections of next year. I was very conscious of wanting to really look at the budget and make a meaningful contribution to its formation. Now, I'll be the first to say that this is an extremely difficult year. For all the reasons that we well know. But I was very, very keen that we should leave something behind for the next council and the next scrutiny committee post-May of next year to build on. So I was anxious to really do something constructive and positive on the budget. And just to say that for those that don't know, that on Friday, the chairs and vice chairs of all the scrutiny committees met with a view to setting out a strategy for what I think we might call a more meaningful contribution to the budget, which I felt went really well. So I'll say no more at this stage, but I'll ask Tracy Langley now to give us her presentation. Tracy, please, will you speak to the committee?
Chairman, thank you very much. I think the portfolio holder for finance and the deputy leader, Councillor Painter, was going to say a few words first.
Would they like to put their crosses in the box for us? Anyone like to speak before I ask Tracy to give a presentation? Could you just put your cross in the box? Right, I can't see any crosses. Okay. So perhaps they've become tongue-tied. I doubt that very much, knowing them as I do. But if they change their mind, we'll bring them in. But Tracy, perhaps you'd like to kick off.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair, and thank you for allowing me to speak to this this quite important sort of topic. And I have been really mindful of Councillor Buscombe's request to have a more meaningful contribution to the budget from the Overview and Scrutiny committees. And certainly when I first got here in last November, one of my reflections and one of the conversations I had with the leader and the deputy leader was that we needed to do the budget differently because the line-by-line savings mechanisms weren't working, and also that we had got to a point where we needed to do some really detailed work on what we were spending our money on, so some zero-based budget work in order to reflect that in a sort of a new way of doing our budget. So that is what I am bringing to you. So is a new way of doing our budget. I have one of my colleagues, Peter Hocking, who is going to be sharing a presentation for you. And while he's doing that, I've also got Ellie Wilcox here, who's the Deputy Section 151 officer, who and between her and Peter know many bits of the detail. So today what we're going to do is to take you through the process for setting next year's budget and the development of the medium-term financial plan for the following 3 years. As I've said, my reflection of the budget process is that you spend as a council quite a lot of time looking line by line at budgets and trying to make savings in your own portfolio areas. But this has shown not to work, and the reason why we know that is twofold. One is that we've still got a gap in the budget, and the second thing is that the council has not been great at delivering on the savings that it says that it's going to deliver on. So we do need a new way of doing that, because we know that the old way doesn't work. I suppose one of the things that drives towards is making savings in a sort of portfolio directorate way, instead of looking at how we work the council more efficiently and effectively across the whole council. So one of the things that we need to do is to right size the council's budget and look at the whole council's budgets and what we spend our money on using that zero-based approach. My second proposal has been that we have to focus on what we put our resources towards. So if we want to deliver the outcomes that you want to see and that what the residents and businesses want to see in Cornwall, we have to be able to focus those resources, and we can't do everything, you know, and I think it's a very local government-y thing, but you know, we try to do everything, and actually all that does is dilute the really important things that we want to do. So this year's budget process is different from the one you've seen previously. And you will see from what I'm trying to do here that I'm proposing that that overview and scrutiny see the details of the overall sort of budget and the numbers and how we're trying to deliver a budget in a very different way than you will have seen previously, and that before the draft budget gets to Cabinet on the 16th of September, you will be given an opportunity to be able to scrutinise the whole budget, but also each scrutiny committee will see the impact of that in their own areas. Then in October there will be more detailed sessions on the draft budget and what all of that means. And then there's a further session in January as well. So you'll get lots of opportunities to look at the overall budget and what that looks like, and how you can influence the whole budget by the time we get to agreeing it in February. So you can see here that we've got a bit of a presentation. There is a report which shows you the outline of what we're proposing in terms of sessions for you. But I thought I'd take this opportunity to take you through the process that we're using to develop the budget. If you can move on to the next slide, please, Pete. So I thought in the first instance we'd do something along the lines of some of the stuff that you will have seen before, which is the estimated impact of COVID. And the thing that I will say about this year's budget is that never in my life have I seen so much financial uncertainty. So this is the first time, and I've seen some, you know, I'm sort of a bit of a turnaround director, so I have seen lots of organisations who have been very seriously in a serious state with their finances. But I've never got to the place where I've not been able, with my team, to land on assumed figures, because everything is so uncertain, and that makes this all a little bit more difficult. But I thought Ellie might be able to take you through this estimated impact of COVID-19, where we are right now, and again, it moves, doesn't it? Thank you, Ellie.
Good morning. We thought it would be, as Tracy said, just to take you through this estimated position to kind of set the context to what challenges we are facing going into this financial year. As Tracy said, it's pretty unprecedented. We haven't been here before, and there's some really big financial challenges. So the table in front of you splits out the potential financial impact over kind of 3+ financial years. So this isn't just hitting this year, it's going to have an impact next year, the year after, potentially the year after that. And actually we've already taken some of the kind of the hit in the last financial year, so 2019-20, with the kind of the financial accounts have gone going through audit committee and going through the audit process at the moment. So what we have got in front of us is the kind of down the columns is the financial year impact, and then kind of running down is split into the different types. So we've got kind of direct expenditure that we've incurred, so the cost. We've had the impact on loss of income, for example, car parking income or planning income, the impact of savings delivery, so through either the savings not being achievable because of redirection of time and resource to actually deliver that, or the fact that it was felt that trying to continue with that saving at the current time was not the right thing to do. And then that's been offset by funding received. So this is the unring-fenced government grant that we've had in, and we allocated 1.6 million of that in the 1920 financial year to have an overall zero impact. But by doing that, what it means is there's £1.6 million less for this financial year, so for 2021. And when you take into account the costs that we've incurred, the loss of income, the undelivered savings, that's giving a net impact this year of 5.2 million on the council's revenue budget. Now, the hugely caveat, that is an estimate at a point of time. We are, the figures are changing continually as new policy comes out, and we're seeing the reaction to COVID and how things are kind of moving. Car parking, plannings. These are all based on an assumption, and as we've moved further through the year, these become shore up. So these are likely to move. And then lower down, you can see there are the wider impact, because Cornwall Council is a really complex organisation. It doesn't just have its revenue budget, it's got lots of other entities and activities that it does. So here we've got the HRA, which is the Housing Revenue Account. And again, there's an impact of potentially 2.4 million for that. Tamar Bridge and Torpoint Ferry, so kind of the loss of income that they're collecting through suspension of tolls, etc. That's got a £2.1 million impact for Cornwall Council, potentially, because we share it 50-50 with Plymouth. And also our capital programme, so with additional costs of around 1.7 million through the capital programme. This is where projects have been delayed, and we've had which might have a potential cost for that delay. And then the big figure in the 21-22 plus column is the council tax and business rates, which is estimated at the moment at £23 million. So the reason why this is in the future years is due to the accounting regime around council tax and business rates, which is through what's called our collection fund. So at the beginning of the year, we set a number of different assumptions of what level of council tax and business rates we're going to collect. And then we take a precept from that. And then at the end of the year, when we close it down, we work out whether there's a surplus or whether there's a deficit. And what we're seeing at the moment is that we feel that there's going to be a deficit on that, so that which shows us we're collecting less council tax and less business rate than what we thought that we were going to collect. Now that is then spread over future years. So previously, any deficit that you had on your council on your collection fund, you had to take in 1 year. Recent announcements from government is allowing us to spread that over 3 financial years. So not all of the hit will be in 21-22. It will be spread over the kind of the rest of the MTFP. But there will be other impacts in future years when we set the assumptions for the 21-22 collection fund, and so therefore the council tax and business rates, because we are seeing reductions there on what we call our council tax base. So that's the number of properties that we are able to precept from, and a lot of that is around the council tax support that we're giving to residents. So we're seeing increases in the number of residents needing council tax support, which therefore means that we have less, it has a kind of a direct relationship to the number of properties that we are able to charge council tax on. So the council tax and business rates is having a really big impact, and it is likely to be seen across across the financial years. Government again have suggested that they will support and help with that. To what level and how, we don't know yet. So the details around that haven't yet been announced, but we're expecting that later in the autumn to be included as part of the comprehensive spending review. So that was all I was going to say on the COVID impact of COVID. Pete, if you could move on to the next slide, because before COVID, we had the number of other financial pressures kind of facing us and local government as a whole, which I just thought would be quite just to kind of set a bit more of that context for everybody. Our central funding, so I'm in the budget reports and in the MTFP. I'm sure people and councillors are aware around our central funding and particularly around fair funding review and the business rates retention schemes and the white paper around social care funding. Now, all of these have been delayed kind of due to COVID-19 crisis. So we were hoping to get a bit more certainty around the funding, whereas at the moment that's unlikely to happen. Demographics, so councils across the board, we're all finding that those demand-led services, so kind of adult social care, children's social care, homelessness, housing, fire for us, they're all increasing. So as kind of particularly in the adult social care, as demographics change and population ages, it is putting increased pressure within these services. And kind of particularly in Cornwall, we're seeing the number of complex cases increase, which is having an impact on the budget and in seeing changes in kind of the division or the allocation of where you need to put your resources is changing. We're also experiencing market and provider failure. So there were some really large-scale contractor failures, such as Carillion, which has impacted, unfortunately not impacted us as much as other councils, but it does change the way that we're looking at service delivery, and particularly within Cornwall, we've got some market issues in for example the adult social care sector, which has an impact on kind of the prices that we need to be paying. So there's both those larger market issues, but also some of the market issues that we face in Cornwall, which has an impact for us. Overall, we're seeing that reserves are reducing as councils are needing to use reserves to help balance budgets. As it's getting tighter and tighter and tighter, we are having to draw on reserves, which then impacts on councils' abilities to cope with emergencies or external shocks to the size of kind of COVID. And we're more fortunate than others, but